Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. Most Hispanic parents speak Spanish to their children, but this is less the case in later immigrant generations. U.S. Latinos say it's important for future generations of Hispanic to speak Spanish, and the vast majority speak the language to their children. However, the share of Latino parents who ensure the language lives on to their children declines as their immigrant connections become more distant. According to a new Pew Research Center analysis, over 85% of Latino parents say they speak Spanish to their children, according to the Census 2015 National Survey. Of Latinos. Among the immigrant parents, nearly all 97% say they do this, but the share drops to 71%. Among the U.S. born second generation Latino parents, those with at least one immigrant parent, and the share falls to just 49% among third or higher generation Latino parents, those born in the U.S. to U.S. born parents. Spanish also declines in mixed families where one spouse or partner is non-Latino. About 92% of Latino parents with a Latino spouse or a partner speak Spanish to their children. By contrast, just 55% of Latino parents with a non-Latino partner or spouse say they speak Spanish to their children. Besides speaking Spanish to their children, Hispanic parents can pass on the language by regularly encouraging their children to speak it. About 70% of all Hispanic parents say they provide such encouragement often, but again, successive generations are less likely than immigrant parents to say they do this. Spanish has long been a part of life for today's Latino adults. 9 in 10, 90%, say Spanish was spoken in their home when they were growing up. And 81% say their parents often or sometimes encourage them to speak Spanish when growing up. Notably, 20% of Latino adults say their parents often or sometimes discourage them from speaking Spanish, unlike some other language measures. This share holds relatively steady across generations. So this chart says later generation Hispanics are less likely to encourage their children to speak Spanish. So Hispanic is 70% often. Among immigrant generations, foreign born is 82. So as they get farther from the immigration parents, they speak less and less Spanish. Not only do nearly all Hispanic adults have a personal connection to Spanish, they also express a desire for the language to live on. 88% say it's important to them that a future generations of Hispanic living in the U.S. be able to speak Spanish, with vast majorities holding this view across generations. The Census 2015 survey findings show that Spanish dominance is on the decline among second and third generation Latinos. While 61% of Hispanic immigrants in the U.S. are Spanish dominant, and another 32% are bilingual, the share who are Spanish dominant drops to 6% among second generation Hispanics and to less than 1% among third or higher generation Hispanics. Meanwhile, the share of Hispanics who are English dominant rises across generations. Just 7% of immigrant Hispanics are English dominant, a share that rises to 75% among third-generation Hispanics. Overall, about 40 million people in the U.S. speak Spanish at home, making it in the country's second most spoken language. At the same time, growth in the number of Spanish-speaking Hispanics has slowed. According to the Center's analysis of U.S. Census Bureau data, as a result, the share of Hispanics who speak Spanish at home has declined, while the share that speaks only English at home has increased, especially among children. These trends are expected to continue as Hispanics born in the U.S. increasingly drive the group's population growth, in a large part due to slowing immigration from Mexico, and to lesser extent, high intermarriage rates. Already, most U.S. Hispanics say a person doesn't need to speak Spanish to be considered Hispanic. Latina language expert explains why immigrant parents don't teach their kids Spanish. Put away the judgy eyes. Teaching kids Spanish has been something divisive within the Latino community. Latino parents who migrated to the United States claim reasons they haven't taught their kids Spanish. This has drawn criticism from many, with some calling it a selfish act. But Micah Belu explains that it's not that simple. The founder of True Fluency explains on TikTok that many factors contribute to kids not learning their parents' native language. She posits that not learning Spanish or any non-English language can cause a disconnect within the parent-child dynamic. For immigrant parents, not teaching their kids their language can be an act of survival. Confusing kids with additional language is among the many reasons parents choose not to raise them bilingual. Some people believe that adding another language can confuse children. The Cultured Kid explains that this is a common misconception among parents. The publication details that teaching kids another language will impede their ability to speak English, especially at a young age. However, studies cite that the younger you teach a kid Spanish, the better. A Cambridge study found that children can pick up multiple languages. Not only did they pick it up, but they also code switched between the two. In her TikTok, Belu quotes a study that found some kids living in bilingual homes don't speak their parents' native language. The study out of England and many other countries that roughly shows that 21% of kids living in bilingual households don't speak the native language of one of their parents. The minority language meaning the language not being used in society, she says. Belu continues, they use Spanish as an example. For many people who balk and gasp, how do the parents speak Spanish and the kids don't? How do they not speak their mom's language or their father's language? The bilingual parenting experts add that she typically tells people not to judge parents who do this. I always tell people to put away the judgy eyes until they've actually tried to do this in their real life. It's quite challenging, really, especially in the parents who also understand English, she affirmed. Teaching kids a second language like Spanish hasn't always come easy for immigrants, whose goal is to assimilate. Unfortunately, growing up in the U.S. hasn't come with its difficulties for immigrants. Routed magazine likens linguistic assimilation to xenophobic aggression. The publication writes, the linguistic assimilation is an undermining experience that Mexican immigrants come across when they arrive in the United States. The dominant country in the global north considered as a graveyard for foreign languages. The Van C. Tran defines language assimilation as one-way process whereby members of ethnic groups acquired English and abandoned their mother tongue, with an endpoint being English monolingualism. It continues. Because of this, there are many Latinos who grow up not speaking it. And farther removed they are from Spanish-speaking parents, the less they speak it. A Pew Research Center found data to support this. It cited that 24% of U.S. Latino adults said they can only carry on a conversation in Spanish a little or not a lot, or not at all. When you consider third or higher generation Latinos, the percentage increased. About 65% of third or higher generation Latinos admitted they cannot carry on a conversation well in Spanish. The expert also shared the struggles of other cultures who haven't taught their children their native language. In addition to expressing her position on the difficulty of instilling another language, she shared the story of Chinese immigrant family who relocated to the U.S. While the story was about another culture, many of its points resonate with the Latino experience. There's a beautiful yet sad story of a man who grew up in California with parents from China, and the mom slowly learned English because she was the main parent and dealing with the school, doctor's appointment, and American society in general. The Latina founder continued. And the dad was always working in Chinatown and other Chinese speakers in order to support the family. And so the mom started speaking in English with her son because it was the societal language. Belew explained that the boy grew up not being able to communicate with his father, something that happens between many U.S. Latinos and their Spanish-speaking families. So the son cannot speak to his father, who he grew up with. Crazy, right? But not really. The child was never made to use the language or hear the language, therefore does not speak it, Belew pointed out. She also asked viewers something rather poignant. Why would somebody be able to do something they've never done before? Bringing marine life back to South Florida's Forgotten Edge. An experiment in nature-inspired design is underway in South Florida Residential Canal. 2 mangrove planters are being installed on a new seawall to provide habitat for marine wildlife. At the back edge of a backyard in a dead-end South Florida canal, Arthur Tideman is drilling holes into the face of a seawall his marine construction company recently installed. The seawall is a newer design of reinforced concrete encased in vinyl. It's a smooth, hardened ledge at the intersection of land and sea that's designed to protect property and make the coastline more habitable for people. The problem, Tideman says, is that it makes the coastline not very habitable to anything else. It's not a natural shoreline like mangroves and sand, he says. It's just a straight, giant wall. That's why he and his crew are on a bobbing barge outfitted with a crane, installing 2 first-of-their-kind planters that, when hung, will house 2 living mangrove trees on the otherwise featureless wall. The planters are pock-marked and rough-cut, etched and grooved to mimic oyster reefs and mangrove roots. They're a wildlife-focused add-on, one of the latest products in a fast-growing commercial market that's selling homeowners and municipalities on a more holistic approach to marine infrastructure. Even these tiny little pores you get, those are little pockets that tiny organisms will start to take up residence in, says Keith Van de Reet, the designer of the new planters. We're in a time period, a golden era, where humanity has kind of realized what we've done here. Tideman says, gesturing up the dredged canal, with the erasure of so much natural habitat, pollution, overfishing, and climate change, populations of popular fish like grouper and snapper are declining. Water quality in many canals and bays is worsening. There's a growing recognition that municipalities and property owners need to improve the shoreline and build infrastructure with the environment in mind, Tideman says. That's what makes all these properties worth what they're worth, he says, referencing the mansions lining the canal, the water, and the enjoyment of the water. A Forgotten Edge. The new mangrove planters were designed by Keith Van de Reet, a professor at the University of Kansas, who's helped with their installation. An architect by training and an avid angler, Van de Reet has long been interested in finding ways to improve the design of coastal infrastructure so that it benefits more than just people. For more than a decade, his primary focus has been on seawalls, what he calls a forgotten edge. I've always wanted to be near water, says Keith, and the ideas of creating things that are beneficial for people and other species, I find that appealing. And the reason, he says, is simple. In many places, it's the only shoreline left. This all would have been meandering mangroves, maybe a mangrove creek, here that people just blew out, he says. By dredging the waterway and barricading its edges, people have taken that soggy horizontal plain, a life-rich intertidal zone that supports oysters, crabs, fish, and birds, and collapsed it, he says, into a vertical wall with a single dimension to it. Marine organisms don't like homogeneity. They like nooks and crannies, places to hide. The more texture, the better, Van says. For water-filtering oysters, a keystone species in marine habitats, concrete seawalls, the standard in South Florida, for more than a century, can provide some of the texture. Van points to clusters growing on a concrete ledge just below the scum line, just one property down where his planters are being installed. It's a sliver of habitat compared to what they'd have in the natural environment, he says, but a critical one. And it's now at risk of shrinking further, as many of South Florida's concrete seawalls, built in the post-World War II boom, are hitting the end of their lifetime. When Tideman calls the seawall pandemic, those seawalls, it turns out, are increasingly being replaced with steel or vinyl, smooth, featureless products that offer no welcoming texture for living things. We're taking that last 1% of habitat that they're clinging to and changing the material, Van says, pulling the rug out from under these oysters. His hope is that his mangrove planters will help sustain populations of those oysters through the transition. Mimicking nature. Globally, there's a lot of innovation happening and new products like Van becoming available, says Rachel Gitman, a coastal ecologist at East Carolina University. Property owners can now buy artificial reef balls or request vertical oyster gardens. Miami Beach recently installed its first living seawall, a wide mangrove root-etched panel designed to provide a habitat and protect against storm surge in southwest Florida. A similar style wall panel, created by Van, has been in the water since 2016. There's a push towards, can we mimic nature? And can we reproduce it in a way that's going to support biodiversity or productive fisheries or erosion protection? Gitman says. She's not convinced all of the new products will work. It's hard to emulate nature. But in places where the habitat has already been lost, or if someone's just going to put in a regular seawall, I think it's a better option, she says. Even a small little oyster reef can support a lot of organisms. The real challenge will be creating enough of them. A study published in 2021 found that only 15% of the world's coastal regions remain ecologically intact. Restoring those coastlines, Gitman says, will require significant policy changes from national and local governments. She adds that in places like South Florida, where coastal infrastructure is being updated to accommodate rising seas and the vast majority of coastline is privately owned, it will take buy-in from homeowners as well. We are in this critical period where we could make huge leaps in terms of how our infrastructure is designed in this country. If we make thoughtful investments and we don't just build exactly what we had 50 years ago, she says. I hope that's not what we do, but we don't always learn from our mistakes. Cryptocurrency. AI join in $31 million super PAC blitz in 4 congressional primaries. Together with pro-Israel funds, the tech money is swamping Democratic rivals in the Chicago area and, according to one government watchdog, distorting democracy. Democratic congressional candidates Daniel Bliss from left, Robert Peters, Junaid Ahmed, and Kat Abu-Ghazaleh have been targeted in a $31 million spending blitz funded by pro-Israel cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence interests. National special interest groups, which now include deep-pocketed cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence interests, have spent tens of millions of dollars to influence 4 hotly contested Democratic congressional primaries in the Chicago area. Through Thursday, super PACs whose donors are hard to track had reported spending more than $31.4 million, including more than $6.1 million for attack ads that are swamping voters ahead of Tuesday's primaries. The portions from the crypto, AI, and pro-Israel groups total $26.9 million, a WBEZ review of federal campaign disclosures has found. The super PAC spending is far more than the last time the Chicago area had U.S. House primary races without an incumbent. In 2022, U.S. Rep. Jonathan Jackson's campaign saw more than $1.1 million in super PAC support, while U.S. Rep. Delias Ramirez's bid got a $1.5 million boost. This election cycle, a handful of congressional candidates are seeing quadruple those amounts go toward their individual runs, with most of that super PAC money coming from a pro-Israel group and the trillion-dollar cryptocurrency and AI industries. There's nothing wrong with interest groups getting involved in politics, said Alyssa Kaplan, an executive director of Reform for Illinois, which tracks campaign money. But when some groups can drown out everyone else because of their bottomless pockets, it distorts democracy. The super PACs cannot donate directly to candidates or coordinate with them, but can spend unlimited sums on their behalf. In the 7th Congressional District, which includes some near western suburbs and parts of the downtown and west and south sides, retiring U.S. Representative Danny Davis has endured State Representative LaShawn Ford. But Ford has faced attack ads about a federal bank fraud caused against him. In 2012, prosecutors indicted him on 17 fellow counts. The case collapsed in 2014 when prosecutors dropped all those charges. He pleaded guilty to a single misdemeanor tax charge that resulted in probation. The ads are part of a $2.5 million anti-Ford barrage by Fairshake, a super PAC linked to cryptocurrency interests. The group, formed in 2023, tries to limit regulations on that financial sector. Ford last year helped pass legislation to regulate digital asset exchanges, a measure opposed by some cryptocurrency groups. Ford told WBEZ he sent Fairshake a cease and desist letter, which has not been answered. I would expect there to be some dirty politics. I didn't expect there to be lies about my legal record, Ford said. They've been lying, saying I was convicted of bank fraud. Fairshake also spent more than $817,000 on negative ads in the 2nd District. Which covers parts of the South Side and some nearby suburbs. The ads attack State Senator Robert Peters, a leading candidate to replace U.S. Representative Robin Kelly, who is running for U.S. Senate. Crypto is not well liked, particularly in the working class black community. Peters said they have so much money they could flood the zone with misinformation to try to convince the voters that the U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders backed candidate is somehow beholden to corporations. Fairshake did not respond to a WBEZ request for comment. Unlike Fairshake, a group aligned with AI interests has yet to go negative. The group, Think Big, has pumped more than $1.1 million into digital ads and phone messages for former U.S. Representative Melissa Bean's bid for the 8th District, which spans western and northwestern suburbs. Her website describes AI as a powerful tool, but she did not respond to WBEZ about the contributions. It also gave Peters' opponent, Jesse Jackson Jr., a nearly $1.4 million boost for his comeback campaign. Think Big did not respond to WBEZ about the contributions. The bulk of the super PAC expenditures in the 4 U.S. House primaries are linked to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a national lobbying organization that opposes strict human rights conditions on U.S. military aid to Israel. As of Thursday, AIPAC-type committees had disclosed spending more than $20.5 million to promote the group's favorite candidates or attack rivals. That's on top of millions of dollars from individuals, most outside Illinois. The AIPAC channeled to the congressional campaigns of Bean, State Senator Laura Fine, and Cook County Board Member Donna Miller, a WBEZ investigation found. The largest beneficiary of AIPAC linked spending in Chicago Treasurer Melissa Conyers Irwin, running in the 7th District. One super PAC has spent nearly $5 million on her behalf. Next is Fine, who is among 15 candidates competing in the 9th District, which stretches from the north side through Evanston and several other north and northwest suburbs. AIPAC linked committees have not only spent nearly $4.4 million promoting Fine's candidacy, They have bankrolled more than $2.6 million in attacks on her best financed opponents. Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss and content creator Kat Abugahasela defined statement to WBEZ calls a suggestion that outside spending would influence her policy positions laughable.